Was Adolf Hitler's regime orchestrated, or was it something that became organic with the people that he had sway over? Looking back into his history, we're going to take a deep dive, well, half deep dive, I guess we should say, into his rise to fame, rise to infamy, and eventually his rise to the end of a lot of Jewish people. Now, what we're going to go into is a little bit of a satiated history for Adolf Hitler, including a little known arrest that led to his first book, Mein Kampf. Volume 1 and 2 were separated by a year. He wrote Mein Kampf in 1925 and then part 2 in 1926. But very few people understand or know about his imprisonment, and I put those in air quotes because it wasn't much of one, for a crime that should have landed him in jail way past the age of childbearing, meaning past 80. So in 1924, Hitler was before the People's Court of Bavaria in Munich. For what charge? Insurrection, under Article 80 of the German Penal Code. Now, for the most part, one might think, wow, that kind of a treasonous act should be leading to either his end of this life or possibly life in prison. That's not what happened. What eventually led to was his incarceration to the term of a very, 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 when I say very, it's very difficult for me to say very, enough, few days. He eventually did not serve any time necessarily behind bars. In fact, it was more of an upstanding and high end living facility, if you want to call it, kind of like akin to Jeffrey Epstein's house arrest. It wasn't, he could do what he wanted to do. He could still have access to writing. He ate what he wanted. He could do what he wanted, dress how he wanted. There was not a whole lot that was really put on him when he got put in prison. Now, the people that had questions at the time was, how did he get such a lenient sentence? It seems that he may have had some people on the inside, hence where our conversation is going. At the time of his arrest and when the case was going, the judge at the time, Judge John Neinhardt, was the one that people thought was the one on his side because he was pretty lenient with the way he was handling the case. Not the defense nor the prosecution seemed to have any real inclination to prosecute this case to the fullest extent, even though it came before them. So where our case may seemingly fall apart is, why even bring it to begin with? The best way to get somebody to gain access to the people's mind is to make them either a martyr or a champion of rights. They got almost both with this court case. You see, on the one hand, Hitler showed up as the person that you can say, hey, he is all about trying to get people to get their freedom, to make this a national country one, make us all one. This is why he's fighting for it. And he's fighting so hard for it that he's willing to go to jail for it. There's no better way to get people on your side than to come across as a sympathized person, making your case to where you are seen as the one on their side. You have to think about it this way. How difficult would it be for him to just come, having gone through nothing, to just tell people, follow me? He has never been through the ringer. He doesn't know what's going to happen if you do come out and talk about the ones you want to talk about, but he did. And the best way to do it is to put him through it himself. That's exactly what he did. So in February 26th, there was an official trial that was set. Hitler launched into almost a 3.5-hour speech that he gave, almost like the kind that he would normally give when he was doing his own regime. And you have seen probably from videos, even though you may not understand the language, how passionate he spoke. If it's one thing you can tell about Hitler is that he was indeed a very verbose individual, very learned. He was not an idiot. He was not slow. He was a very, very, very intelligent man. Otherwise, he wouldn't know how to manipulate people. I guess his forte would be speech. If there was a level that you could put him on, it would be that of an orator. He knew how to convey, he knew how to convince, and he also knew how to connive. During the arguments for the defense or the prosecution, they were very, very lenient on what they thought he was doing. This is what they said. He was misguided, but morally legitimate. I don't even know how you persuade people to think like that for the prosecution, but that's exactly what he was. In their minds, he had problems, but what he did, he was just needing some more direction. So we need to make sure that we don't make him as a malevolent person or an evil person. We have to make sure that he is the kind of person we tell people that he is just needing direction. And what direction best than to just let the man go through a season of recovery? And that's exactly what they did. So during that speech that Hitler gave, he replaced a lot of his anti Semitism with some of more nationalistic, aggressive speech. So while he did not come straight out and say the things that we knew he said later on, what he tried to portray to the courts was that I am simply trying to be a man of my people. Now, a lot of you are probably going to hear that and say, that sounds familiar. The difference is this: what he went through with the courts were actually on the same side as him. What do I mean by that? When they were put through to have this actual argument and the information brought from one side to the other, there was very scarce reason to believe that the prosecution was even against the man. That there was nothing that you can look at and say, oh my goodness, they have a legitimate case against Adolf Hitler. So our question rose about this: did he have some sort of sway over this in order or orchestrated with the powers that be to make himself be a bigger picture person so that when he did launch into the political sphere, he would have some foundations to stand on? That could easily be what their thought process was. He didn't have a criminal record per se. He had troubles, no doubt. He did not grow up to be one of the most, he was very smart, but he had a learned person, but he had a little problematic things in his youth. But you couldn't call him a convict. He still had at least what they could say, something that they can reform. So by 1924, Hitler was indeed found guilty of high treason. But the verdict was not the same as the punishment. They were giving him 5 years fortress confinement, and he was fined 200 gold marks. But he was eligible for parole after 6 months. Now, in the location that he was, there was, like I said, no uniform, no label, and you didn't come out with any sort of a label on you that did this, and this. Every day he could go around the place like he would regular, dressed like a civilian, ate what he wanted, did what he wanted, and he had at least for the most part, the advantage of solitude. And it was in this solitude during his imprisonment that he wrote Mein Kampf Volume 1. Mein Kampf would later go on to be the fortress foundation on which he built his entire regime. All of his mindsets that he could possibly come up with, he came up with while incarcerated for that short period of time. The original 5-year sentence, he only served 9 months of that. So he had a 9-month period of sitting down in a luxury location to finish and finalize his thought process that would eventually become the Hitler regime. I'm not sure how many have read this book, but I don't want anybody taking this the wrong way, please. But it is indeed worth the read. Why is it worth the read? There are many things that take place in history that is worth us trying to learn about, know about, for the purpose of not repeating it. With Mein Kampf, you'll get to see a insight into how he did what he did, the why he did what he did. We're not justifying what he did, but it gives you an insight into the man himself. There are tons of stories being told about Hitler, tons of them that are 100% accurate. But the reasons why he did stuff are listed in his book. While they may also be partially biased because he is writing about himself, the one thing that you cannot take away from it is that what he is saying, he actually fulfilled. Everything that he had planned to do, he did. The question is, how? How did Hitler get away with being the kind of person he was, saying the things he said, and being able to execute them with such high degree of accuracy? The only way he could have done it is if the original government people were on his side, if not orchestrated his regime for him, set it up. To what ends and for what purpose? Still unknown. How? Still unknown. But a majority of these people that were on his side originally, seemingly on the surface, were not. They all seemed to kowtow. Many thought it was because he had violent means of doing it, but he had never done so. A lot of his execution orders were done by other folks. That's the crazier part about all of it. By 1925, after he got out, that's when he launched his Nazi party. And by July of that same year is when he published his book. Now, in the publishing of that book, is what he did is he gave the public a way and an insight to find out more about his regime, his plan, and his ideals. So while from the pulpit is what you want to call it, he persuaded many. They can go back, read his book, and see exactly that he is the same man on stage as he is in that book. And that is how he persuaded people. He persuaded them from the version of himself that was all about the national identity and having only and literally only one type of person available to you, around you, with you. And by type, I don't mean for the nation, I mean type in look, DNA, all the above. Because if you don't remember, too, what he also was about was eugenics. Now, the eugenic side of him is what he did to implement his idea. He had to push the idea first. And he sure enough did exactly that. For many years, people thought for a long time that Hitler was just a hateful ideological person, but he was not. In fact, he was very calculated. He knew he could not pass this off as hate to begin with. The way he had to pass it off was concern. It had to be from a perspective that if you knew that your place was going to go somewhere that you didn't want it to go, and you wanted to protect the way you are, not what you believe necessarily, but what you are, there are certain measures that you must take into consideration. And those measures might be difficult, but look at me. I went through the ringer. They tried to get me, but my development happened because I've been through this. I'm not speaking as one that haven't been through it, y'all. I have been through it, and now I'm on the other side. That's how he persuaded people. It couldn't happen, though, seemingly without the help of the current government at the time. There was no way that you can look at the article that he was filed under and given the kind of leniency that he got. The only way that could have happened is if the people that did it, originally brought it, were the same ones in charge of making it happen. It seems as though that's exactly what took place. It would also make sense as to why he gave and had the kinds of power to go around right after his prison sentence to do exactly what he had to do. He made his rounds and he was given more airtime than just about anybody else. In fact, when he finally did get into power, he made sure that he was the only one heard. Our purpose for telling this particular story isn't necessarily to try and convince anybody about anything about Adolf Hitler. We just found it rather odd that a person of that ilk doing what he did for the time frame that he did, as violent and as evil as it was, we just found it kind of crazy that he was allowed to, seemingly, with absolutely no other kind of pushback except from foreign countries. But when we looked at it and we thought to ourselves, maybe this was the catalyst for everything because it was a set foundation long before he became who we know as Adolf Hitler. Maybe the reason he got to that level was because he stood on shoulders of people who had just as an evil spine and backbone as he did. Maybe the only reason that he ever was brought on trial was so that he became quite versed in how to make people go on trial as well. And the birth of Adolf Hitler began, we believe, at the hand of the government.